Hello, this is Dee Damson, and today I am going to do a Christmas tree, and this one will be more like illustration, and it's going to look like it's coming directly out of a children's book. And the easiest way to sketch this is to make a huge number 2, and then on the back side of the number 2 you connecting the tail with the top and slightly curving it around. I will have the traceable available for you on my Facebook page, and the link is in the description below. But it's separated on sections, and each section is a trapezoid, and it's gently going or slightly getting smaller right underneath the next trapezoid on top. So you're creating that illusion that it's a tree, not a hat. So you're creating the different levels. I am gonna use a masking fluid here, and pretty much what that is, it's like liquid rubber that will dry on your canvas paper in this case, and after it dries, water will not be able to go underneath, or paint will not be able to go underneath. So the purpose of this is, if you think you're gonna need some really pure color somewhere and you're afraid that a color is gonna go under, you can cover that area with that masking fluid. You don't have to actually make it very thick. As soon as it looks like it's wet on the paper, that means you have enough to cover. The only thing is, you need to make sure your canvas, your picture dries, your art is dry before you start putting the paint on top, because otherwise it's going to stick to your paintbrush. And when you're using the masking fluid, use a brush that you really don't care for, because that will definitely ruin the brush. So on that Christmas tree, I'm going to use a couple of different techniques, and the first one is going to be dry on dry, and I'm going to make a couple of sections like that. I'm going to add the darker color underneath each trapezoid, because that is where the shadow is. It's casting a shadow, and the bottom part is stretching out, so it's exposed more to light. And my brush is going to be moving from top to slightly to the side, going from the left side and going to the right side. Obviously in the center part you're going to have brush strokes that are going directly downwards, but every time you are on the left, move slightly left and kind of 20-degree angle, and same to the right side. I am mixing my greens with yellows and ochre and whatever blues I have. So experiment with your blues and yellows, and also experiment with your greens and yellows and greens and blues. You can create so many beautiful green colors, and obviously yellow and green will make this really pale, very cartoony kind of a green, because I don't think the Christmas tree looks that way, but it's a fun color. And what I'm doing here is trying to reactivate the darker paint that it's on the top of the trapezoid, and kind of move it slightly downwards, because that's part of the trapezoid on the bottom, and I'm going to do the same thing on the top. When the paint is reactivated, it starts shifting and the edges become more soft. So where the two paints are meeting, if you gently rub back and forward on the area where they have a border together, you are going to create softer edge. I always go with my wet brush all the way to the end of an area where I have paint, because every time you create a wet spot on your watercolor paint, it's going to dry with a little harder edges. and that can create a really cool effect. So you can try to experiment with that, but in this case I just want everything to be very, very soft. I'm also gonna add a shadow right underneath the Christmas tree, and my shadows are more blue than dark green, so I'm mixing more blue in my green. So on the top areas, I'm using a very light background, and then I'm adding on that wet surface, I'm adding the top darker area, and as soon as I add that darker area on the top, it's gonna start shifting and moving towards the wet area. When I'm dealing with the smaller areas, like where I'm approaching right now, I will use pretty much a kind of a dry, wet on dry. I am going to not apply water to my surface and then apply the colors, because I want to have a lot more control over the area. And now I'm starting to add more brush strokes with just different greens, starting from the darker area going to the side on each direction. So left goes to the left, right goes to the right, center goes down. And it almost looks like a really cool Christmassy skirt. But that is going to be our Christmas tree. And try not to be predictable with your brush strokes. You can space them differently. You can have thicker or thinner ones. Don't make all of them absolutely the same. So when you go to a small area and you add too much of a color, and you definitely wanted to leave a little bit of a highlight somewhere, what you can do is with your brush, after you clean it and you dry it a little bit, you can start picking up that color away to get that highlight before it dries. You can also pick up color after it dries, but it will be much harder. I am cleaning this areas on top of that masking fluid, because that is pretty much like a rubber on top of the paper, and the paint does not dry that fast there, and if you start rubbing it off, you might transfer it right where you don't want it. Also, when you're removing that masking fluid, make sure that whatever area is placed on to be completely dry, or it's gonna start smudging things around. I am adding a simple background, so you're gonna see two different colors on the top and the bottom, and pretty much I'm using wet on wet technique. I'm adding water, and I could have switched to a bigger brush, but this is the brush that came with one of my sets, and I usually try to torture myself, I guess, and I'm going to use the same brush, and that will show you that even if you have one brush, you can still do a painting, and it's gonna be okay. It might take a little longer, but it's still gonna be okay. So I added water on the background, and now I'm just placing paint and gently moving it around. So our background in this case is not that important. I'm not gonna add too much. I want to concentrate on that Christmas tree and also on the ornaments on it. I want to make it pop. I will add more color, more blue color closer to the tree, and that's going to make the tree kind of pushed forward. You're going to see how that works. So the darker color is gonna make that area being pushed back, and everything that it's lighter, it's gonna seem closer to us. So it's a very good illusion. And this area is drying much faster, so I added paint and it wasn't shifting enough for me. So I went back with just a wet clean brush and moved that paint around. And you can see the areas that I have darker blue. All of a sudden the tree on that area, the blue inside the tree popped out too. So you're pulling colors, different colors by adding a color next to them. If I have added a greener background, that was going to do the green being pushed forward, or if I added a yellow background, it's going to push the yellow color to be more visible. So I'm peeling this off, and it seems like, to me personally, that's too much work. I had to apply it, I had to wait for it to dry, and then paint over, and now remove and make sure I'm not gonna smudge on top of some of the areas. So it's not that hard to peel it off, but to me it seems like that's too much work. So I'm gonna add a little bit more blue right underneath, and it's gonna be much closer to that top line. And also some of that blue is gonna end up on the snowy part of the tree, and that's where the masking fluid was. So now that is white, and I'm gonna add a little bit of a shadow on the edge of that white, and it's going to make it more three-dimensional looking. And also on those spikes of the snow that are just coming up, I'm gonna choose one side and add a little bit of a shadow there, but it's very pale, it's very transparent, so I'm not going heavy on this at all. I'm gonna add a little bit of a shadow right underneath the ornaments to make them pop up and seem more three-dimensional. And also we're gonna add a little bit of a shadow right underneath that snow on top of our red ornament. You can do a star, you can do, I was even thinking to do a squirrel hanging off that ornament, or a pine cone, or something funny, but maybe next time. So for the ornaments, I'm gonna create almost like a smile on the bottom side, and then I'm gonna run a clean wet brush over and around to fill in the rest of the place. For this, the ornaments are way too small, so it's really better if you just go with a super transparent color all over that red ornament because it's so tiny, and then just add a line underneath for the shadowy side, and that's gonna give you more a three-dimensional ornament looking thingy. So if it was a little bit bigger ornament, what I'm doing, it was going to be okay, but for this size, just do that. Cover it in with a very pale red, and then just add a little bit of a smile on the bottom to make it look more three-dimensional. And from this moment, I am just going to go over on the ornaments with a very transparent red, and then I'm going to add this tiny little smile on the bottom of each ornament to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional, and that will be so much faster because they're too tiny. And let's play a little bit more with that big ornament on top. Add a little bit more shadow underneath, and that will lift our tree a little bit and make it sit on the ground, not just float. And we're gonna add a few snowflakes here and there, and also I'm going to give them a little sparkle with a iridescent fluid that I'm using. I'm going to post everything in the description below, all the materials and where you can find those things. I'm gonna add a little sparkles to the snowflakes, and also I am going to add a little bit of sparkle on the white area, which will make it more interesting than just white and give us that illusion of sparkly snow. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell, and I will see you soon. Happy painting! Thanks for watching.